our government must continue to work towards enhancing gender equality and empowerment.
If you are a woman and you are coming to present something that maybe it's a male's dominated industry, as a woman, you have to do extra.
It always worried me that the salary difference between myself and my male colleagues, there was a huge difference.
A lot of the people that I had to lead were males, and if you know, culturally, people are not open to being led by a female.
Government must look after all the women in South Africa.
It's 7 p.m. Sunday night. Let's get after it. It's Topical starts right now. A very good evening to you, South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical. Our digital audience with us tonight will get their questions for our guests in a short while. Women's Month, a time to honor women. They have fought, they have won, they have lost. So they continue to fight. How do we prevent this month from just becoming a period simply to pay lip service to the struggles of women, and then it's all forgotten by September? One of the biggest battles being fought currently, equality, the gender pay gap, what has been achieved, what more still needs to be done. Tonight, we celebrate and recognize women's strength, resilience, and contributions, how they continue to shape this nation's narrative. But our mission is also to take a deep dive into the obstacles that are in the way of progress, acknowledging the ongoing struggle for gender equality and economic independence. It leads us to the question of the week, and we're asking you, in your view, why does the economy still seemingly give men first chance while women are left behind? And more importantly, what's the solution here? Let us know at SABC News _TV. Let's walk and talk, get to some context, heading to the magic wall. But there's the bigger question here, right? How many more hurdles do women need to jump over in order to achieve that same medal that men receive? We'd love to hear your thoughts at SABC News _TV. Perspective coming up. So last year, Stats SA put out a report titled South African Women Struggle with Unemployment and Workforce Inequality. And it says, regrettably, women in this country continue to shoulder a disproportionate burden of unemployment, underemployment, and lower workforce participation compared to men. Why? Well, it goes on to say that this is partly because women are more likely to take on household duties, child rearing, and other responsibilities that limit their opportunities in the labor market. How do we change that? How do we balance the playing field? We will discuss in a short while. Let's tee up the discussion for you, what we know and why it matters. Economist Sithandiwe Msomi joins me now live for Perspectives. Thank you so much for coming onto the program. We need your better mind to understand. Context important. Numbers are nothing without context. What are we learning in terms of women's participation in the labor force?
Yeah, absolutely. I think chief among all of the statistics that we see of a 32.9% unemployment rate, women largely being in the informal sector, we need to contextualize the discussion on how exactly is employment determined? How do firms determine how much to pay women, given that the gender pay gap as well is a huge issue? And so when we look at exactly how the market is willing to, or prepared rather, to pay women, things like the unemployment rate plays a huge role. And as you discussed, women are largely represented in the care economy, in things like ECD services and social services. And what society tends to do is integrate some of the social stereotypes that we have and put a lower premium to those services, such that when women go into maybe corporate or manufacturing or all these sectors that are critical to industrialization, the market really doesn't see women as people who can participate equally. And so you have issues such as women firstly being excluded from those top positions in these some of these important sectors, and number two, being paid less than what men are paid. And just recently, a study done by the National Business Initiative showed that for every R1 that a man earns, a woman only earns 78 cents, right? And it's a huge disparity for the same qualifications that women have. So it's important to see these unemployment numbers within the bigger context of what market or what signal does it send to the market.
What sort of trends are we picking up in terms of the labor force participation rate?
Absolutely. So you can see that in Q2 of 2014, women had a labor force participation rate of 50.9%, and it's increased to 55.8%. And so you'd think that if women are increasing their participation at a faster rate than men, as you can see that men have only increased by 2%, you'd ask yourself, isn't things like education enough? Isn't things like employment equity through legislation, whether it's BEE, whether it's the Employment Equity Act? And while we have all those policies and acts legislated, we also have to ask ourselves, what are some of the social dynamics that continue to keep women out of the labor force? And remember that the labor force as well doesn't take into account the informal economy. And women make up at least 89% of workers in the informal economy, right? And so you've got a huge demographic of women there who are working as hawkers on the side of the streets or domestic workers who are not necessarily counted in these numbers. But even those who are getting educated and who are going into the labor market, they just simply aren't getting jobs that are well paying enough because of some of the stereotypes that we continue to see in the labor market.
What about the absorption rate?
Yes, absolutely. Absorption rate speaks to exactly at what rate does a woman, let's say a woman who graduates from university, get absorbed into the labor market. And you'll find that in South Africa, the average duration of unemployment is significantly high, even higher when you're a woman, right? And so you could ask yourself, a woman has a degree, why isn't she in work? But issues such as teenage pregnancies or you know, rape, all of these societal issues that have a huge impact on a woman's capacity to not only get a job and be absorbed into the economy and the labor market, but for her to stay and be in a mentally good place to actually be productive and work is another issue. And I think in this country we talk enough about GPV and the statistics that we see. And it's unfortunate that as a country we don't actually see those issues not just as social issues, but an economic issue. Because a woman who's gone through trauma is probably not going to perform at the best at a rate that's comparable to a man who has things easier for them, right? And so we need to ask ourselves, why aren't women staying in the labor market and being absorbed at the rates at which we see men? And those are some of the societal issues.
Is it factored enough, though, given the current state of play? Do you feel more needs to be done in order to, you know, look at these nuances, look at these issues, and highlight it to a point where it starts making an impact in women's lives? 100%.
And it starts back to ensuring that economic planning and the architecture of our economy is gender sensitive, right? So, for an example, women are the primary caregivers in their homes, and the share of women who are earning salaries is what's keeping households living and breathing in South Africa right now. And so with opportunities such as ICT and the digital space, a lot of women could benefit from working from home while taking care of their kids. But how can we do that if we aren't investing in broadband internet in rural areas? How are we ensuring that even in our infrastructure planning, are we planning infrastructure such that it's sensitive to the needs of women? And so it's important to look at some of the areas where women have immediate access to economic opportunity and integrate that into our economic architecture in our country.
What can we learn from this? The unemployment rates across qualifications, what is it telling us?
Sure. This, I think, is a primarily concerning one because we place a lot of emphasis on young women going to school, getting educated, but you can tell that from 2014 to 2024, graduate unemployment rates amongst women is significantly higher than that of men. And it's telling that education itself is not the only enabling factor that allows people to be absorbed into the economy.
Yeah.
And so number one, it goes back to the fact that the huge broader unemployment rate in this country and the primary sectors that women are involved in already place a lower premium on their wages, such that an employer thinks it's okay to maybe pay a woman less than what she's worth, right? And so we need to deal with all of those structural issues and deal with them from a gender-sensitive lens, so that all of the other gender issues are actually addressed in how we determine wages, how we ensure that even women who have studied are absorbed into different sectors. And again, I think these numbers are particularly more jarring in male-dominated sectors. Again, your mining, your construction, logistics, all of these economic sectors that things in the NDP deem as important for economic growth, and they're still largely underrepresented in terms of women participation. And so those already serve as social barriers that prevent women from participating, even though they're continuing to get more qualifications than men necessarily. Yeah.
We need your better mind, so we're going to keep you onto the program for the discussion. Thank you so much indeed. Sithandiwe Msomi is an economist. Context, always important. We're going to flesh this out in greater detail in a short while. To our regular Word on the Street feature, we took to various streets of the coastal and inland regions of the country, seeking diverse insights and perspective on this topic. And this is what you had to say. Take a look.
To me, as a young teacher many years ago, I started off, and it always worried me that the salary difference between myself and my male colleagues, there was a huge difference.
If you are a woman and you are coming to present something that maybe it's a male's dominated industry, as a woman, you have to do extra to prove yourself that you can do it.
The industry I'm in is a male-dominated industry, and a lot of the people that I had to lead were males. And if you know, culturally, people are not open to being led by females.
I believe that government can do much more better if they give us as females chance to explore ourselves, to show our talent, to show what we can do, to show that we are strong enough to lead, we are strong enough to be out there and do much as they say we cannot do.
So we're doing the same job, so why should we be paid less? Why should I be paid less? Because I am a woman particularly. I can do the same thing. Like these things of gender inequality, they're just not good.
In other sectors where there's not so much transparency in terms of the salary structures and salary compositions, that women are facing situations whereby they are not getting paid as much as their male counterparts for the same job.
Government must look after all the women in South Africa, not just a few, all of us. We need these businesses. We've got children to feed.
Really appreciate your thoughts on this matter. Let's get the discussion started. Is there reason to celebrate this Women's Month? It's important to acknowledge the achievements, but also acknowledge the challenges. And Women's Month gives us an opportunity to do that. We are gathered in studio by great women. Professor Puleng, LenkaBula, Principal and Vice-Chancellor of UNISA. Thank you so much indeed, Prof, for joining us in studio. Sithandiwe Msomi is an economist. She's still with us. Thank you so much indeed. Also, on our virtual platform, we have the Deputy Minister in the Presidency, Nonceba Mhlauli. We also have Advocate Brenda, Madumise-Pajibo, Director for Wise for Africa. Thank you so much indeed. And we have a digital audience as well. Please raise your virtual hand if you have any comments for our guests, questions for our guests. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Prof, maybe I can start with you. And the issue of inequalities. At this juncture in South Africa's history, what is reinforcing inequalities?
Thank you very much, Blaine, for inviting us. It's a well-known fact that the inequality in South Africa was systematically enacted by apartheid legislation. 31 years later, with the transformative and the changes that the democratic situation has brought has been in the changes in legislation to ensure that inclusion and women or gender-sensitive systems are enacted or engendered in our governance systems. The second part is it's not just in legislation; it's in the assertion about the role of women in the economy, whether at a macro, meso, or micro systems.
Yeah.
How do we ensure that women or gender parity becomes an important imperative in how we organize our institutions, whether the public sector, private sector, and civil society sectors.
Yeah.
The third aspect is that despite the cultural and sometimes religious norms that have often encumbered women and tried to create hierarchies where women are seen to be at the bottom,
Yeah.
akin to apartheid logic of those hierarchies where women and men, white and black, and others were hierarchized.
Yeah.
The democratic dividend, therefore, enabled the agency of women to be active participants in the economy, to have access to education,
Yeah.
higher education, even though Sithandiwe was saying higher education access does not necessarily give one the requisite competitive edge in the economy, but I think it does somewhat give something, a form of access.
Yeah.
The other component that I think we've not talked about is, are we thinking about the economy at a micro level where we participate in the labor?
Yeah.
And I think the contribution I'd make is that South Africa has made it possible for women to participate in enterprise development, in the investment opportunities that are available,
Right.
but also in participating in leading institutions that oftentimes women were marginalized
Yes.
from. And
Yes.
therefore, inclusion has not just been, it has been real, but there are barricades and fault lines.
Right.
The fault lines are in a society where patriarchal and careerical norms,
Yes.
there's domination of men, but also in hierarchical systems
Yes.
of master-servant. Majority of women face barricades within
Right.
the economy. They participate either as consumers, but not as owners of businesses who must necessarily and fundamentally change society. And when they do it within the context of home. And unpaid labor within our context is not legislated as in a quantifiable way as it would be in the Nordic countries where it is quantified,
Right.
and therefore social systems
Yes.
and social insurance is made available for those who are doing the care work.
Right.
So I think we should affirm the strides that have been made, but we should also undo the barricades
Right.
that actually obstruct women from optimizing their agency in transforming the economy. And I think education, agency,
Yes.
inclusivity, and constantly advocating for women's voice and women's talents to being recognized in the
Right.
economy are important imperatives.
Deputy Minister, what, from your perspective, is widening these fault lines? Look, the criticism often is that South Africa has the best policies, its implementation that is an issue. From your perspective, where do you see the wins, where do you see the losses?
Good evening, Blaine, and good evening to my fellow panelists, as well as the audience that is joining us virtually, as well as at home. I think so. Firstly, I'm in total agreement with everything that Professor LenkaBula just said. And in actual fact, yesterday, when President Ramaphosa was addressing the official Women's Day commemoration, the theme was actually around building resilient economies for all, particularly women who are often forgotten. And I'm not going to repeat what Sithandiwe, as well as the Prof has said. Where are the gaps and what do we need to do going forward? So if we say that we collectively, wanting to fill these gaps in, taking our women along in, formal as well as informal sectors of the economy, ensuring that we close the gender pay gap. I think that, we must have a comprehensive approach. One that will look at, first and foremost, I think it was Ms. Msomi who spoke about the issue of the widening gender pay gap. And the first thing that we need to do there is we need to strengthen our penalties for non-compliance on gender equity targets, both in the public and in the private sector. Because these things, as you said, they do exist on paper, but the issue then becomes the compliance thereof. And what we have to do is to ensure that departments that are found to be non-compliant, the penalties are strengthened. Private sector companies that are found to be non-compliant, our penalties, they are strengthened. But also when you speak about, the care economy investment, something that almost all women, do because of, as the Prof has said, it's part of, the patriarchal makeup of our society. We have to build and fund, most importantly, we have to build and fund, sectors where women are mostly active in, which is the care economy, an economy that we often view as a service economy, but it is an economy and it is a place where women are actually very active. We have to expand our targeted funding, mentorship programs, minimum set-asides for procurement quotas for women-owned businesses. It's something that we speak about in government, but again, the issue becomes the enforcement thereof, but also the tracking of the compliance. And just lastly, before I give over to the other panelists, just this past week on Thursday, together with the Minister of Electricity and the Minister of Communications, we were actually in Tshwane, where we were handing over smart laboratories to schools in Atteridgeville, particularly focusing on STEM education, And the most beautiful thing out of that is that most of those classrooms were actually filled with young women. Again, it's a sector of investment, it's a point of investment that we have to, pay more focus on in terms of scholarships, mentorships, workplace entrepreneurships, particularly for our young girls who come from the rural and township areas.
Right. Advocate Brenda, from what you've heard from the Deputy Minister, does it resonate with you in terms of practical ways, for example, the penalties that companies face in order to narrow this pay gap, the gender pay gap? Does that resonate with you?
Good evening to everyone. Listen, South African business is violent in the way it deals with its employees and broadly, right? And they actually budget for penalties because they're not willing to go the extra mile, right? When you have a structural problem with an economy structured the way it is, a capitalist economy that puts profit over everything else, right? So I'm not going to be worried about how much you earn because my ultimate goal is to ensure shareholder value. If it means that I have to cut down the workforce and compromise the quality of individuals that I've employed, I'm going to do that. So structurally, and a capitalist economy is not going to deliver gender equality the way we want it to deliver. Let's be honest. It's not going to. It's driven, it's profit motivated. We have instruments in this country. Government is the biggest licensor of many companies in this country, whether it's a banking license, whether it's a telecoms license, whether it's a money license. We have not used those instruments to effect the changes that we are looking for. And we need to start now to do that. Penalties, they budget for penalties. They're willing to pay a penalty because they do not think that is something that has to be done, right? So until such time that when we talk about collective responsibility as a country and talk about shared responsibilities, we need to talk about shared opportunities that must go beyond the male and be given to women, and women have shared opportunities too.
Sithandiwe, what does, in practical terms, collective responsibility mean, especially in the workplace?
Yeah, 100%. Collective responsibility really goes back to what Prof. LenkaBula raised about optimizing economic agency for women, right? Because at the moment, women are operating within many confines, whether it's trying to become owners of the means of production. There's challenges there with maybe not being able to get a loan from the bank to start a business, etc. In the workplace, we've spoken extensively about the gender pay gap. So we need to look at it from many different approaches. I think given the fact that our country is facing systemic issues across the board in terms of our economy, we do need to talk about women in the workplace, but also women in terms of owning the means of production. Because ultimately, we've got a crisis where the economy itself is not even growing. We're growing by less than 1%, GDP. And that in and of itself affects women at a greater degree to which it affects anyone else. Right. And so it's important to think about, from a government perspective, simple things like asset disposals by our SOEs that are currently happening now. We're talking about ESCOM breaking down into 3 units, generation, transmission, etc. Are we talking about how many women-owned businesses are taking part in those different economic activities that are happening? Because ultimately, the social issues that women face are rooted in an economic crisis where when women are earning less money than men. And so it's important to ensure that when we have the broader conversations in this country about growing our economy, we also talk about how we ensure that women become owners of the means of production, how women get into management as well, because representation plays an important role in all of this. And it's unfortunate that in a lot of the boardrooms we are talking about, whether it's the private sector that is willing to pay penalties, a lot of the time you don't have representation of black women, let alone young black women. And those are the role players who are going to be able to ensure that when every decision is made about a gender pay gap, a woman in the room should be able to say, actually, we need to ensure that women earn the same amount as men, because this woman is probably taking care of relatives at home, supporting people at home, supporting people in their community. And it's unfortunate that I think a representation issue as well, it is what drives a lot of these issues that we face. But it is important to contextualize this in the broader economic issues that our economy is facing.
I see hands up already from our digital audience. Let's go to Langu Telani.
All right, thank you, Blaine. I'd just like to make a comment that really emphasizes Sithandiwe's point about patriarchy, because the reality of the matter is that South Africa is still deeply patriarchal. We live in a society, and that can affect women's participation in the economy in multiple ways. So I just want to focus on 2 points, right? Firstly, you have to consider how hegemonic masculinity and patriarchal culture are embedded in our economic institutions to the detriment of women making a meaningful contribution to the economy, right? And this is where the element of preference then comes in. Our economic institutions are essentially boys' clubs. Secondly, when our economic institutions center and place value more on men than women, the consequences then look like women doing more free and cheap labor, women being segregated and channeled into lower paying sectors, gender pay gaps, etc. Right? These structural issues still exist and burden women in the economy today. I know my point, Blaine, is more sociological, but it's important that we understand how and why our society was constructed the way it is today, and how the tide continues to move against women in the economy, right? In that way, we're able to uproot the issues that affect us and affect women more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Deputy Minister, let me bring you into this. In terms of these structural issues that has been raised, what has government done in order to address these issues?
I think so. Firstly, as I said earlier on, that and I like the point, the sociological point that the previous speaker speaks about, because we often, speak about the economy and forget that the economy actually exists within a society, and that particular society has a historic condition under which it had it had developed under, and that, you know, in most instances, even with a lot of government intervention, you will find that there is a lot of pushback precisely because of the historic, you know, makeup of our society. Part of it being that, you know, this is something that I particularly personally raise all the time, that even in fact in government, and I'll come to your question just now, that even in government there actually is a hiring and a promotion bias against women, even within the public sector. You know, even if you look at your highest level of the public sector, which is your DGs, majority of them remain men, even though at a political level, of course, President Ramaphosa is one of the most progressive presidents in the world to actually have a gender, 50-50 split in terms of the makeup of his executive, which is something that we should really applaud as South Africa, that we are actually one of the few countries that have more than 50% women representation. Now, coming to your question in terms of the dealing with the structural issues in our economy, I think so firstly, as we've said before, we have the laws that are there, and those laws say that women must be compensated equally. They say that women's, participation in the economy must be recognized at the same level that as men. And therefore, the question becomes, how do we enforce that we already have, and how do we make sure that non-compliance is actually something that is dealt with? But most importantly, if you look at the structure of your private sector, for an example, right? Government has invested heavily in ensuring that you have targeted, procurement. For an example, if you're saying that there's a set minimum procurement quotas for women-owned businesses specifically, a very progressive policy, again, that says that out of every government policy or government tender or procurement that goes out, there has to be a particular quota, which is 30%. Set aside for firstly youth, and then another set aside for women-owned businesses. Through the the NEF, National Empowerment Fund, specifically again funding opportunities directed specifically for women, through the NYDA funding opportunities specifically directed for human-owned young businesses owned by young women in particular. So you've seen that there's actually a lot of investment ensuring that you are able to channel the type of investment that you need towards ensuring that women-owned businesses actually do take off and that they do become successful, but also supporting women-owned businesses to ensure that they are able to compete with the companies that would have previously been owned by men.
Right. Prof, you wrote something recently, and it was in the context of reflecting on the 31 years of democracy and the progress that has been made. But you also said that the work before us requires more than compliance. It demands conviction. Yes. What does that mean?
So some of the issues that we have just discussed now about labor, absorption of women, they're about employability, underemployability, or even the casualization of women's work. But I think we should speak on the structural issues. How do we reform the economy and to ensure that it's not just based on employability and so on? How do we look at those numbers around women who have their own initiated businesses and ensure that we empower them to creating transnational businesses that are competitive, not only in the country, but also in the continent and the world? I think that would transform the economy. The second aspect is, how do we ensure that in a world where we know that a global economy is not just constituted of productive economy, as in industries and whatever, but there are digital systems that are consonant to developing economy. How do we ensure that we enable, equip, empower women to participate in digital systems, digitalization, but also exposure? So for us as the University of South Africa, we have thought it's important for us to be a partner to our society and to our government to ensure that even those critical skills or complex skills that are relevant for both productive and for speculative economy, whether financing systems, whether digital systems that are quite relevant for the global economic arrangements, including South Africa's participation, become quite important. The third aspect that I think we should be very attentive to is the fact that we must have active agents who are monitoring and evaluating our performance in the economy, how the rand performs, how the speculative and as well as productive economy become a twin project and a twin investment, and how we also empower universities, TVET colleges, basic education, to make sure that the natural sciences, the STEM subjects, as it is the humanities and social sciences, are strengthened, because innovations and transformation in our economy will be dependent on multidisciplinary systems that empower and interdependently transform our economy. And I think women are quite ready to be active participants in ensuring that both productive, speculative, or the multidisciplinary systems and arrangements within the economy are their participation dividend. And I think if we strengthen that, if we make sure that legislative mechanisms are available, if we ensure that small businesses have not just microfinance, but they have people who curate them, who enable them to flourish, I think that conviction to saying it is our moral or ethical duty to ensure that the gains of democracy are translated into economic transformation as it would be social capital is something that I think must be a central point to our engagement, but also to institutions of learning such as the one I lead. Thank you.
The distance we must still travel remains long and uneven. To complete your thought, look, lots to discuss. We're trying to dig a little deeper, looking at the gains, but also looking at the challenges. What lies ahead? This long road that women need to travel in order to achieve. We're going to discuss it with the better minds next. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. Just to remind you about our question of the week, and we're asking you, in your view, why does the economy seemingly still give men first chance while women are left behind? And more importantly, what are the solutions? Let us know at SABC News_TV. Let's go to our digital audience, get their questions for our guest. Tumelo, you had your hand up. Let's hear from you. Very good evening.
Good evening. Yes, my hand was up, but it was actually for a comment. I wanted to add the fact that, a lot of the times we find that particularly in the small business and medium-sized business sectors, there's oftentimes non-compliance unintentionally. If there perhaps could be more investment in education and bringing awareness of all the requirements so that we ensure that while we intend to introduce punitive measures to ensure that there's compliance, we have in fact invested in training and bringing awareness and education of what is expected so that we ensure that everyone can then comply. And also, if we talk about perhaps punitive measures, I heard some of the members here in the panel speaking about the fact that you find that bigger companies will be budgeting, for the penalties, and we have to therefore find more effective measures to ensure that it's more than just penalties, a form of punitive measure to ensure compliance. For example, it has to impact on the actual operation of the business so that we ensure that they will in fact take it seriously, that they should comply.
Right. Thank you so much, Tumelo. Let's hear from Rejoice. Hi, Rejoice.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Good evening to the viewers at home and the other guests and the panel. What's your question again?
No, I thought you had a question. Do you have any questions for our guests?
Not really, but what I wanted to emphasize is that our government has good structures on paper of supporting business women. But the problem is the access. It's difficult to access information as a businesswoman from rural areas.
Right.
It's difficult to get information. You need to rely on internet to get information, and the internet is not there. Even the network connection, it's difficult.
Yeah.
So if government can focus on making sure that whatever that is providing for the people must reach the people, because where we are in rural areas, we are not getting the information. It's difficult for people to get information. So that is the main problem that we are facing.
That's an important point, Rejoice. We're going to get the Deputy Minister Mhlauli to comment on that in a short while. Let's hear from Funeka.
Hi, yes. My question is, can we foresee a future wherein women, or like in the near future, wherein women will be perceived as economic equals? Because between like what was mentioned, where companies find loopholes against these policies of inclusion, and also the statistics that were presented where women earn 78 cents to a man's 1 rand.
Right.
It seems as though the odds are stacked against us. And that's a very serious concern for myself, for example, because I am a student and I am going into the workforce soon. But currently the situation seems very bleak. And I just wanted to ask or to know if anything will change in the foreseeable future, or is this still a long journey ahead?
Advocate Brenda, let me throw that to you. Do you see a future where women are economic equals?
I think what we are refusing to address is how economies are structured. Throughout the world, most of these economies are market force driven, right? So when you are market force driven, and I'm going to emphasize, you are market force driven, the priority for you is making profit. So let's take this example, blame. It is something that we should be looking into, and how are we going to address it? Currently in the world, they have done away, in the retail sector, they've done away with person-to-person interaction of someone being on a till and being a teller, right?
Right.
You pay your groceries not to someone, but through a machine. The majority of employees we find in the retail sector are Black women. In the next 2 years or so, that workforce is going to be affected by the introduction of that technology. In fact, Pick n Pay has been trying for the longest of time to introduce that. They have been held back because there's been conversation with government not to deploy all that technology. It's something that is already happening. And the majority of those affected are Black women. What is our preparation with those Black women? Where are we going to deploy them in the event that they lose those positions? Because it's going to happen. So there has to be already in the conversation around what do we do with all the industries that are automating.
Right.
The biggest hit employees after COVID were domestic workers. They were let off by many of us, right? Because one, most of us could no longer afford to have full time, but at the same time, because of the affordability, where did you go and hit first?
Right.
It was domestic workers. So for me, is that this economy, the way economies are structured, and because we're a global world, we find ourselves in entering and exiting in this global world,
right,
where profit, and let's talk about how money is created and how it moves. Because when that money is created and the way it moves, you have these issues of a country whose foreign currency is speculated upon, and it leads to other issues, right?
Right.
And until we have that conversation around the structures of economy, and our economy in particular way is structured, that it's exclusive, and as it's and a colleague has said earlier, that is a boys' club. It will continue to be a boys' club because of how it was designed.
Right.
So we are being asked to play with a game that we didn't design. So maybe it's about time that we design it the way we understand it, the way we understand our lived experiences, and to bring in all that conversation in the boardrooms, so that everyone else sitting in that boardroom can understand how we as women, interact and how we operate.
Prof, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, I think one of the contributions I was trying to make is to say, if we pivot education at the center of economic arrangements and imagination, we will therefore anticipate some of these questions that were asked. Two, if we reskill and multi-skill in an economy that I've said South Africa is intersected with the global trading arrangements, then we would be able to ensure that the critical skills that are necessary for transforming our economy are quite important. But also that legislation is not just on employability, but on enterprise development and on enabling companies that are already existing, whether they're micro or meso companies, that they have the productivity or competitiveness to be globally competitive companies. We cannot transform our economy unless we invest in the quality of education, but also in anticipating South Africa's participation, both in productive and speculative economy. And therefore, we must make sure that as much as we do train people who can industrialize, who can participate in infrastructure, in buildings and so on, we also need those who are able to speculate, to ensure that they protect the rand and its value, and they can as well ensure that whatever minerals, whether minerals, biotic resources, human resources of the country are protected and are not sold for cheap. And this is part of how we transform women's participation. It's not just about us as women, but it's also about our economies, our societies, and our families. And I think that's a project, that's a twin project that must be taken by all sectors and not just government intervention. So enterprise development, education that anticipates the future, investment in both productive and non-productive or speculative economy. Otherwise, we will constantly reduce our discussion around women's participation to labor, to care work, and also to inequalities. We know those, we live them. But our assertion and aspirations as women is to look at how we can expansively have a large footprint in turning around the economy. And I'm hopeful. I was appointed after 143 years as a Vice-Chancellor of UNISA. So Funeka must not lose hope. Even after 140, as long as we continue to advocate for change, for social justice, for structural policies, and for ensuring that the economy and the contribution of women is projected, I think we are in good stead. Thank you.
Let's hear from Pabalo.
Good evening to our viewers at home. Good evening to our guests at the studio. It's actually Eunice Mahopa, it's not Pabalo.
Okay, welcome.
Yes, thank you. I would like to agree with the professor in terms of what she outlined by saying South Africa has the best policies in place, but we lack implementation. Look at when we go to workplace, I think we go to workplace with cultural beliefs, because we grew up knowing that men are more capable of doing more of intensive labor work than women, and women are also expected to remain at home. So let's look at the statistic that you've shown on your screen. I mean, the numbers are not lying. It actually shows us that our relevant department are actually lacking in the implementation of our policies. We cannot have 6.9% of women who are not in leadership or women who are unemployed compared to men. So let us also look at workplace bias in hiring and promotions, because history has made us believe that men are capable of doing what women cannot do. And also I would like to outline on issue of entrepreneurship, because our relevant department are always encouraging young women and old women to go into entrepreneurship. But I think they have also lost touch in terms of basic knowledge. As a woman, you need to go into entrepreneurship, but the department are no longer offering what you call seminars to people in our deep rural areas, because you find a young woman, they want to venture into a certain industry, but because seminars are no longer accessible to people in our rural areas, it becomes null and void.
Right. That's an important point, and it's similar to what Rejoice touched on. Deputy Minister, let me throw that to you in terms of access to information, especially in rural areas.
A very important point, and that would actually be, you know, one of the reasons that we, this past week, actually the whole of government descended to Motšatšhis and Nkowankowa in Tzaneen, precisely because of the importance of understanding that we must bring government services closer to the people. And in actual fact, we spent about 2 days in the area interacting with different women, from the ladies who, you know, who sell at the market, at the local market, to women in the crime prevention cluster, to women who work with different NPOs, to women who are educators, etc. And one of the things that we've actually now agreed that as government that we have to do every time, not just to wait when the president has a presidential imbizo, but for us, going back to the point about ensuring that we actually go and not take it for granted that because it's a government office, therefore the information that is found in the government office is accessible. One of the questions that I asked when we went to one of the facilities, I mean, we were there in the heart of Tzaneen, and we were at a government facility, and the communication there was all in English. And I asked them, I was like, why is this in English? Because if you look at the demographic of the people that you're providing this information for, they are non-English speaking people. So on paper, we'll say that we actually do have the information in Motšatšhis or in Nkowankowa or in Tzaneen, etc. But when you actually look at the content thereof, it is still, you know, a barrier in terms of the public being able to access that information. So it's one of the things that we've actually, you know, picked up to say that we have to ensure that beyond us just saying that we have a police station, we have a small business department office in a place, we have an NYDA office, we have, you know, access to different government agencies that exist in all our communities. We must ensure that the information that we provide is accessible, but also that the people that are there are able to give the type of information that our communities are able to empower themselves. The second point I just wanted to come to quickly before we move on is that I think it's also important for us to not lose sight of the fact that even though we might not be where we want to be as a country in terms of where women empowerment is concerned, but we have come a very long way. I mean, you know, we talk about the importance of recognizing, I mean, the Prof was speaking about the importance of recognizing that the strides that have been made just at the University of the Land to currently have a VC who is a Black woman is something that we have to applaud. Are we where we want to be? Of course not. I mean, for an example, the president is being flown by a young Black woman, Major General Madumise-Pajibo, something that did not happen 10 years ago. So while we look at the continuous structural inequalities that do exist, I think we must not lose sight of the fact that we've come a very long way. Women now have access to space that they didn't have 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and we have to continue to build on the positives that we have been able to achieve over the past 30 years.
Deputy Minister, thank you very much indeed. We need to take a quick break. When we come back, final thoughts. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical, just in time for some final thoughts. We're running fast out of time. So let's try, Prof, with you first, in terms of this long road that we need to travel. But, you know, August not being a month just for lip service. It needs to be practicalities that needs to advance the cause. How do we do that?
Thank you very much. I want to make 5 proposals, and I'll be quick. One, let us strengthen the role of education as a partner to transforming our society, our education, including gender justice in the country. Second, for women to contribute to the transformation of the economy. Enterprise development is essential so that those who run small businesses can grow them into transnational companies that can improve our employment, employability, and more. The third is we should develop as a country, invest in technical skills and knowledge areas on both productive and speculative economies because they intersect. If you industrialize without the requisite knowledge on participating in speculative economy, you will not make the dent that you'd like as a society, but also as a country. And finally, the legislative mechanisms that are available for the development and transformation of our economy must be optimized, monitored, and compliance asserted. But it's not just compliance that's important. It's really to ensure that the social, religious, economic barricades that are put are eradicated and transformed. If we do this, I'm hopeful that women's agency in the economy will transform our society as they would transform the economy.
Prof, thank you so much indeed for your time. Sithandiwe, the Prof's 5 points has eaten up our time, but it was great 5 points. So we'll have to end it there. Thank you so much indeed for your time. Deputy Minister in the Presidency as well, Advocate Brenda, thank you so much. Digital audience, value added, no doubt. Appreciate your time. All right, before we go, here's my take. We have to stop playing to what keeps us apart, right? Stereotypes, misogyny, discrimination in one form or another, restricting women's career choices, channeling women into certain professions by reinforcing traditional gender roles. It's fundamentally important to recognize when this is being done and call it out. Women slightly outnumber men, with females accounting to, 51% of the population? That's around 32 million people. What gives us the right to shape expectations about how women should behave and present themselves? Ignorance is bliss until it's not. Until it's, you know, the women in your life, your mother, your sister, your wife, until it hits home. It's not sustainable nor desirable. So once again, the call is for us to be better than what we oppose. And that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, be sure to watch It's Topical on YouTube as well as on SABC Plus. Unwrap Africa up next with Thembekile. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.